Cool. No lag with this one. It's great. Happy birthday. Welcome, guys, to the Lunge and Live podcast. It is our 1 year anniversary episode. We've officially filmed 3 in person together, and the rest were all over Skype, Zoom, and it's been fun.
It's been great. Yeah, who'd have thought it?
I know.
Every single week.
I know, every single week for a year is probably the most committed to anything I think I've ever been. So I'm really, really happy with how it's been. Have you enjoyed it, Ash?
Absolutely loved it, mate. So yeah, I think thank you for your contribution. It's been great fun doing it alongside you, and yeah, doing all the behind the scenes magic. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good. So I thought what would be a great way to start off today's episode with a couple of would you rathers. So obviously you didn't know this was going to happen. So I thought, just found a couple of online ones that kind of made me smile. And so I thought I'd kick off with the classic one of, would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or 1 horse-sized duck?
Duck-sized horses, I think. Yeah.
So
you can kick. Yeah. I think you could just run and kick them.
Yeah.
But 1 massive duck would be absolutely terrifying. I don't know what you do with that.
No, I agree. I'm 100% exactly the same. Would you rather go back to age 5 with everything you know now, or know everything your future self will learn?
Everything your future self will learn. I think it's tough.
I just think it'd be really weird to be in the playground, like 5 years old, knowing all this. I think you'd have such a fucked up life. And then imagine then going all through like puberty and stuff like that. Again, like, nah. Yeah,
exactly.
I think it'd be so much.
You realise.
Nah, it'd be so much more stressful. Would you rather be an average person in the present or a king of a large country 2,500 years ago?
King of a large country 2,500 years ago.
Oh, really? Nice.
I think they had it pretty good.
They did. They didn't have long lives, but they had it all right. So I suppose,
no phones, just simpler life. And yeah, I'm sure they had a good time.
That's true. Would you rather be forced to dance every time you heard music, or be forced to sing along to any song you heard?
That's good. I think dance. Yeah. I'm a dancer, not a singer.
Yeah, I don't know. I think either one, you're just gonna have people just like, what the hell? So I'd probably go singing. I just think it'd be quite fun because I think
you can get away with it. I think you can just low key it all.
Yeah. Okay, so would you rather have finger-sized nipples or nipple-sized fingers?
I think you're going to go for finger-sized nipples. Like you look weird, but you're functional. You have nipple-sized fingers.
Exactly. At least you can hide them, but with the nipples you've got to tape them down, I guess. Just imagine when it's cold. Would you rather be Would you rather be constantly itchy or constantly sticky?
Itchy. Sticky's just a bit gross.
Yeah, I hate that. I absolutely hate that. Would you rather fart every time you laugh or burp every time you cry?
Burp every time you cry.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
No. Okay, last 3 and then we'll get into the serious stuff. Would you rather have a 10-inch long belly button that swayed to music, or accordions for legs?
I think I'm going to stick with my functional theme, mate. I can't have accordions for legs. So I'm going to stay functional. And
that 10-inch belly button.
Take the belly button. Just tape it up. Yeah.
Would you rather crap yourself once a year in public or every day in private?
In lockdown, in private.
Well, yeah, no, but normal day to day. I'm going to go once a year in public.
In public doesn't qualify whether other people notice or not.
It doesn't say that, yeah. On the side.
If you could get away with it, yeah, you'd have to wear nappies though, wouldn't you? Just constantly in fear.
And last one. Would you rather shout all the time or whisper all the time?
Whisper.
I've got to shout. Yeah, I've got to shout. I'm an extrovert, so yeah. So, but right now,
that's great.
That's a good bit of fun. So right now we're going to get into some of the serious ones. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone that took the time for sending their questions in. It means a hell of a lot, and we got some absolute great ones. So really looking forward to getting started with these. So starting out with one. So from one of my good friends, Adam. So I'm going to play it now.
Hi, Ash and Rob. Happy birthday to the podcast. Thanks a lot for all the hard work. Lunge and lift has been wicked. Thanks a lot for all the knowledge bombs. Good banter along the way. Right, my question is, Klokov jumped into the open and obviously potentially could get to the games. Do you think that could be damaging for the sport with the grey cloud that's already over it, with the use of gear? Let us know what you think. Thanks again, boys.
So, thanks a lot, Adam. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate the time. Great question. I think, especially CrossFitters as a whole, especially when you're looking up in the pro levels, it's the criticism of being on gear and stuff like that all the time is prevalent. But I think in one self-defense of it is we've never seen what a body looks like that trains every day, mixed modal, and does everything they do. So it's like no one knows we only know what, say, a bodybuilder looks like that tries to, say, get bigger, say, with the assistance like that. So because it's a similar body, but it's not the same, I think there's definitely that presumption. But I think, personally, the whole thing with Klokov going in, he's done grid league before, didn't he, back in the day?
Yeah.
So that was back in, I think, 2015 or 2014. So
I think so, yeah.
It's a while ago. So I think he's been training with Roman, hasn't he? So he's going to be, I reckon he's going to be able to put it out of the bag. But I do think if he qualified, I just don't think you can let him go. I just don't. But same as like Roman couldn't go because it's the visa, but.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think there's a few things in this question. Well, first of all, like for listeners who don't know who Klokov is, Dmitry Klokov is a former Russian Olympic weightlifter who's kind of famous just for being absolute, like,
very
fucking strong.
Yeah.
Just putting up ridiculous numbers and doing a few party tricks with the barbell. And he I think he pulled out of 2012 for undisclosed medical reasons, which they later claimed was a knee injury. But obviously with all the Russian doping stuff, there's some, people think that he basically wasn't a clean athlete. And I think, so the first assumption is that Klokov is definitely a drugs cheat, which, I'm not gonna nail my colours to the mast on that one. I think the jury's still out. And the second assumption is that he's going to be good at CrossFit and that strength will carry through. So I've never seen him do much like CrossFit. I saw him do a grid league event once where he did a thruster ladder finishing on 170 kilos, which is pretty unbelievable. So we know he's extremely strong with a barbell, but something that's also been seen in CrossFit is that that's not enough. Like, you can be very good with a barbell, but there's a lot of other disciplines that you need to master to actually pull out a good open score. And we're recording on Friday morning now. The Open 21.1 has just been announced. I'd love to see Klokov do the double under and wall walk workout, because 170 kilo thruster is not going to be much help in smashing that out in 15 minutes. So he's obviously more than welcome to do the Open and see how he gets on there. If he gets through in the top 10%, it'll be interesting to see how he does in the quarterfinals. And I think only if he goes through will there be a question to answer. Like, if he starts mixing with the real elite guys, then the testing protocols basically come in, I think, from the quarters or the semi-finals, and any podium finisher in the semi-finals and beyond will be tested. So that will be obviously an opportunity to catch any drugs cheats. And there's obviously the famous case of Ricky Garrard, who got busted in the games a few years ago. And I think CrossFit, looking to protect the reputation of the sport, will be looking for people to make examples of. And yeah, if he happens to be able to get through to the later rounds, I'm sure they're not going to leave any stone unturned to test him.
Definitely not. And I think the whole, especially with the Ricky Garrard thing and how, placing so high in the first time round, and then obviously then it being stripped away. So there was so much drama with that that they just can't really afford to do that again so soon. Because that was really, what was it, 2-3 years ago? 2 years ago, was it?
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really, yeah, that mystical year. So, but yeah, so having that Ricky Garrard stint just happening I just think it's going to be, as you say, they can't afford to have that. But I think it'd be really interesting to see if he could kind of make it through to into some competitive. What was that? The OCR guy that went through?
Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter McIntyre. That's it. So that was good fun to kind of see, because he made it past the first round. So it just showed that a different discipline sport that he practiced CrossFit, and so's Klokov. He's been practicing. So it's like, it'd be really interesting to see what athletes from other areas can do in such a wide vast of exercise selection and so forth. So I think it'd be really interesting.
Yeah.
So, thanks a lot, mate. Really appreciate that question. I think it's a really good one. Right. So now on to Jamie. So Jamie says, how to manage and periodize lower body training with 2 to 3 runs per week for general health, using running as a fitness tool, mainly working on leg strength and structural balance. Is that what he means? Come from Insta,
yeah, I think so. Yeah, so he's done a good job of squeezing a good question into the small question field. So I think what he's really getting to here is, I think a lot of people have taken up running in lockdown, and now that gyms are about to reopen, hopefully, people are going to probably be adding back in their normal leg days. And the question is basically around, how do you fit it all in? Like, obviously running is very leg dominant as a cardio means. For me, it's not one you need to overcomplicate. If you listen into our programming podcasts, the last 3 we did before Luke's episode just gone, you basically just need to track your training, track your results, and keep cracking on until there's a problem, really. As long as you're progressing sensibly and you're not having a huge spike in volume or intensity, you should be able to tolerate both. Obviously, it depends on whether your focus is the running or the leg training. If it's just leg training to support running, then it's actually pretty simple, like 1 or 2 leg strength sessions a week around your runs, away from the most intense ones. I would recommend, like, if you're doing some sprints or intervals, put them away in the week from heavy leg training, just to let those there's a methodology called consolidation of stresses, where you want to have the similar types of training together. So if you're training fast twitch, do it all at the front end of the week, and then train slow twitch towards the end of the week. So even though you're still running and you're still training legs, the type of stress on that type of muscle fiber and everything else is packed together to give it time to recover before the next time you hit it.
Nice. I definitely feel personally that I'm trying to do this myself. So obviously with all the cycling and running that I'm doing at the moment, I'm trying to still lift, because I still enjoy it. So it's like trying to find that balance. But with the amount of time it's taken me to cycle and to run, so that's a lot of actual training time. I don't have that much more time to lift. So I have to be really effective with what I'm doing. And I've kind of gone along the lines of anything that I kind of get away with, because if I started squatting, I found it really impact my cycling a lot. Whereas I've been finding deadlifting has been completely fine. So I've been doing deadlifts and I've been doing walking lunges. They've been my 2 that I've kind of been able to get away with. And I think the biggest takeaway that I've realized is just the volume, where I'm so much, I'm used to doing a lot more, say, sets and reps and exercises, by say only doing 2 exercises and less volume and treating it and understanding that it's maintaining rather than necessarily say trying to say build bigger legs or anything like that. It's that mindset shift which has had to change, but it took a while, because before, like, I go and do a front squat, put say 100 kilos in the bar and be like, right, I'm going to go and do some reps, and I'd be damaged for days, because it's like and then I try and get on the bike and I just won't be able to access anything, or same with the run. So it's definitely something that has come from experimentation that I think has then kind of helped me there.
Exactly. And I think that point you make about what are you doing the leg training for? If it's to get bigger and stronger, then it is slightly conflicting with just running. Whereas if it's the structural balance that Jamie's talking about to run, and I think running is probably one of the best tests of structural balance. Like because you're doing so many reps, every step is a rep, you get so much feedback on if you have any imbalances, if certain muscles on certain legs. So like, say your right calf always tightens up when you run, or your left hip flexor. That's a really good bit of feedback to say there's something going on here, which you can then look to address with your movement mechanics and leg days.
Nice. So cheers, Jamie, for that one. And I think we have got this one from George. So this one follows on nicely, which is George gets pretty bad shin splints after doing about 3 kilometers running, and basically it stops him from ever going much further without having to stop for quite a long rest. Have you got any tips for helping reducing the pain from this?
Great question. Yes, it's a very common one in the last year or so, with everyone ramping up their run volume, having previously never done much. So shin splints is a form of tendonitis, or it's an inflammation with muscle pulling at the bone, basically. And people generally fall into 2 camps. It either hurts when they're running or when they're not running. And that's the first thing to ascertain. So for George, he's saying it hurts when he's running after about 3 kilometers. And when it hurts when you are running, that generally indicates a lack of stability. So because he's unstable, the muscle is overworking and getting really tight and painful, and that's when the symptoms come on. Whereas if it was the other way around and actually it loosened up when running, then it would suggest that the muscle's chronically tight and the running is loosening it up and actually alleviating the symptoms. So for George, because it is during running, it sounds like it's a lack of stability, and it could be a few different muscles in the lower leg. There's lots of other ones other than just your calves and anterior tibialis. So have a look into which one of those is flaring up, and look to the other muscles and try and basically work on single leg balancing exercises. So all the simple stuff like stand on one foot and reach the other in the directions of a clock face, so that foot and ankle starts to become a little bit more stable. It's a great way to warm up before a run. And if it improves, then it's a sign that you're on the right tracks.
Nice, really good. And I think we had another running question as well from Charlie. And Charlie said that with the gyms closed, he's got into running a lot through lockdown and lost a bit of weight. Now, when the gym's reopening soon, April the 12th, he wants to get back to try and put on some muscle and some weight back on. So if he keeps up the running, will the long distance runs ruin his gains with a Z?
Yeah, crucial that.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Short answer.
Yeah.
So we've done a couple of great podcasts on muscle gain, which are some of our most popular ones actually. I think episodes 30 and 32, where we talk about training for muscle gain and also eating for muscle gain. And one of the crucial points is that you have to be in a calorie surplus. So you've got to be eating more than you're burning to provide the raw materials for your muscle to be built. And doing long distance cardio has a huge energy demand. So you need to be eating to fuel that, and then even more to build the muscle. So it's not impossible, but it is just very demanding. Like, most people struggle to eat enough to grow muscle without long distance cardio. So your appetite will be bigger doing all that cardio, but it's going to be time consuming and expensive to be eating in a surplus compared to the amount of calories you're going to be burning from that long distance cardio. So you can do it. It might be slower and harder, and you just got to make a priority call of whether you want to put the muscle back on faster or you want to keep up the running. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I guess it also boils down to what type of muscle you're looking to put on, if you're looking to do upper body or lower body, because at the end of the day, it's like you can just go to the gym and smash out the upper body. Essentially what I'm trying to do at the moment, this is essentially just like my goal. You know, I'm doing a lot more endurance training, but I still don't want to look like an endurance athlete. So I want to make sure I still have a good bit of size with me. So something that I'm making sure that I'm doing is whenever I do get the opportunity to lift 2 to 3 times a week, say, it's going to all be volume based upper body work, and focusing purely on just essentially getting a pump. And, you know, I'm focusing a little less on, say, the strength side of stuff, and just focusing on just purely getting that size, because it's, as I said at the start there, I'm looking to look like I still lift while I'm then doing all the endurance work, rather than actually saying, oh, I can bench press whatever, because that now negates from my goal of my endurance stuff. So I find the volume stuff is a nice like little bonus stuff that's not going to take away too much energy as well. So then when you are fueling yourself for those workouts, if you are struggling to get in that fuel, you know, it won't be as hard. But yeah, thank you very much, Charlie. Then we have another great voice note message. Really appreciate this from Harry Underwood. So I'm going to play that one now.
Hi. So in the podcast where you were talking about niggles versus injuries, you were saying how you consider an injury more like when there is structural damage, or like you can see something on imaging. But we know that pain is subjective, and there's like a whole load of psychosocial factors involved. But I also know that imaging isn't necessarily trustworthy either. So I've previously been diagnosed with hip impingement. And through the research that I've done around that, I know that it's really, really easily diagnosed in people who actually are asymptomatic and are having no hip pain whatsoever. So there's a prevalence of being diagnosed with things like hip impingement, labrum tear, that kind of thing, who don't actually have any pain or are asymptomatic. So we can't necessarily go off of structural damage in inverted commas either. So what do we go off of to, I guess, ascertain how severe someone's injury is, or whether they have an injury? I'm guessing it's going to be a mix of both, as probably also dependent on the injury or the niggle that the person is like coming to you about, or complaining of. But yeah, hopefully that made sense. Thank you.
Great question. Yeah, so I think this is a big topic, and we talked about it a lot with Franco on episodes 11 and 14, I think, going into pain science. And there's a few things in this question. One is that you can have pain with and without injury, and you can have injury with and without pain. So structural damage doesn't necessarily create pain, and you can have any combination of those two things. So where do we start? When do we have a problem is probably the most relevant question here. Obviously, if there's pain and there's structural damage, that's an obvious case where something's wrong and something needs to be done about it, whether it's rehab or surgery or whatever. That's a clear problem for everybody to see. But it's when there's a mismatch. So when there's structural damage without pain, or there's pain without structural damage, that it gets really interesting. And I think the one that's most interesting is structural damage without pain, which you see in a lot of elite athletes, actually, because they're basically so focused on performance, they can ignore pain in match and outside of match. It just doesn't really register for them. So the question then is, if there's no pain and there's no symptoms from a performance point of view, is there a problem? The scan is showing there's something wrong, but actually in real life, nothing's actually bad or noticeable. In those situations, I think regular check-ins to see if the structural damage is getting worse is the way to look at it. But as Harry correctly points out, there can be a lot of situations where a scan will show something wrong, but actually, like I've just been saying, there's no symptoms. And the best case of this is muscle tears. So if you scan anyone who trains, you'll likely find some degree of muscle tearing. And a couple of guys I know who work in football always talk about this. If somebody has a tweak in a muscle and the football club is worried, they'll go and send them for a scan, and they will always find a tear, because these guys are training really hard day in, day out. Their muscles are going to have tears in, but that is the nature of a muscle. Like, we know that micro trauma and mini tears are part of the process. And if you are putting your muscles through hard work, those tears are going to accumulate. The severity obviously matters. If they're micro tears, then that's normal and they will heal. If it's a really big tear, then there might be a problem, but it's rarely as serious as people think. And actually, some of the more serious muscle tears can be pretty trivial and actually not impact performance or be a reason to stop. There's a great way of thinking about it I heard, where if you think of muscle as multiple strands, right? There's multiple strands going from A to B insertion to origin. And if a few of them have torn, the best thing you can do is strengthen the ones that are left, because they now need to pick up the slack. If you then avoid loading that muscle, the remaining strands become weaker. So you have an even worse situation than torn and training. So the severity of the tear is really important to understand from the scan. And we could probably be a bit braver with stuff like muscle tears. But I think from a practical point of view, if there's no pain, but there is some structural damage, keep monitoring it and see how it responds to your training. Like, if you keep increasing volume, but it doesn't get any worse, then it's probably a sign that it's nothing really to worry about. I think that's sort of my 2 cents on the matter.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I can add to that, but it's just quite interesting thought, because I know when it comes to, like, when people have had their spines gone through an MRI, and you can see so many people like herniated discs and stuff like that, but there's no issues because they train.
Exactly.
But then because there's, so it's herniated, there's a problem. It's like, but is there, as you said, if there's no pain or anything like that, then is there really the problem? But it's actually quite interesting, this question, because one of my clients, so she was performing a Turkish get-up in a commercial gym a little while back, and a guy walked by, didn't see her, and she was like mid-movement. He tripped over, fell on her, and like the kettlebell kind of went. So anyway, shoulder was inflamed, sore for a good while, and just didn't really heal up too much. And it's still causing an aggravation, probably say about 4 months later. All right, so it's been a while. Anyway, I was doing a Zoom session the other day, and I said to her, why not get it checked out? Because I said it could be this, because as I said, like ghost injuries, at the end of the day, as we've discussed with Franco, and I said about that episode that, once you kind of get over it, and once you know there's something not there, then you can kind of, you're closing the loop, so you've still got that open loop. So she went for the MRI, and so they said, you've got a slight slap tear and a little bit of a bicep tear. Okay, so but minimal, but she has complete full range of movement. She is in pain when she does certain things, but she has complete full range of motion. And he was the doctor was like, he was basically said like, this is uncommon that you can have that much range but still have the problem. So it's quite interesting to see then, because then I said to her, you need to be careful now, because now you've kind of heard the word tear, you're going to amplify like the pain to a new level. And that's the thing, I think that the psychology side of it, as when we had the Franco episode, is so important. And I guess, but he did say to her, keep training, keep doing what you're doing and moving through it. And if they need to, they can have a cortisone shot later on, or if needed, surgery. But I was like, let's just try and work through it for a bit more, and hopefully you get over it now that you know there's something there that needs to be worked on.
Exactly. I think that's really important, that over avoiding pain or over avoiding issues can be more detrimental than actually using them. Like if it is the ghost of an injury, like you say, you actually need to train the nervous system to get confidence in using those positions, because it's been avoiding them for a long time, and actually fearing them, it can exacerbate the pain. So I just wanted to close off that one. Actually, I just remembered I didn't talk about situations where you have pain but no structural damage. So like it can be the ghost of an injury. You've had something in the past where your nervous system is hanging on to that pain and fearful of a similar position or situation. Then it is a question of slowly reintegrating those movements to build confidence, to say, oh, I can use this movement, or I can get into that position, and nothing bad happened. And over time, that confidence will let the pain start to drop away, because it's paranoia rather than a logically rooted fear.
I like your child analogy. Could you say that one about to the shop? That's really good.
Yeah. So the brain and body is almost like a parent-child relationship, where it will only trust the children to go places, so that your parents would only trust their children to go places that they know they can safely come back from. So if they're paranoid, that's when pain can start to enter the frame. So over time, your children go to the shops backwards and forwards hundreds and hundreds of times, and you trust them to get back safely. And as they slowly go further afield, they build more trust that the children know how to navigate. And by the time they're an adult, they'll trust them to go to Australia and back. But that's only because there've been so many reps of going somewhere and coming back safely. So if your 5-year-old said, I'm going to go to Australia and on my own, you probably have a freak out.
Yeah.
But obviously over a lifetime of safe journeys, then most parents develop enough trust to let them fly internationally.
Nice. Thanks a lot for that question. Now, next one, we have Johnny. So Johnny has said, what upper body exercises would you recommend for a footballer with the aim of maintaining strength, power, but not putting on weight? And then what would you also recommend as an active recovery session? And another thing of injury prevention exercises for pre and post workout on a recovery day. So I think he went all in there with these questions. Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Great question. I think I'll start with the upper body exercises recommended for a footballer. Yeah, it's a good question. I think with any sport-specific training, you've got to ask what the demands of the sport are. So what are the demands of the upper body in football? Primarily, you're looking at shielding and keeping your opponent away from the ball when you're in possession, and throw-ons are probably the two ones that jump out to me as like major uses of the upper body. Obviously, football is predominantly lower body. It's about running, changing direction, kicking a ball. So you don't, like Johnny says, you don't want to add much weight or mass in the upper body, because it's just going to slow you down and make you less agile. So in terms of exercise selection, anything that most closely mimics those two things in sport, so yeah, jostling and protecting the ball or doing throw-ons would be the most applicable. So if you were to use gym-based equipment, then doing some sort of sandbags could be good, or like a cable exercise to practice that sort of reverse fly type protecting the ball. Obviously the most functional thing would be to just jostle with a mate and fight over the ball. That's the best way to replicate it, because you're doing almost exactly the same thing. And key things I would look to implement were having it standing rather than any sort of seated exercises, because it's one thing to be able to produce like a heavy delt raise when you're sat down, but actually in football you're going to be on your feet, and you're going to need to plant your feet, balance, protect the ball, and then probably make a pass. So that would be my key consideration then. If you wanted to step further down away from sport, stuff like side planks, just to have that sort of shoulder stability and integration with the trunk and core. But I think those are the key things I'd be thinking about. And obviously for throw-ons, practicing your technique, and then maybe breaking it up into throwing the ball faster or throwing a heavier ball. So lighter for faster, heavier for stronger. And just getting lots of reps of technique to work on timing to maximize your distance there.
There's also this is obviously not football, but it'd be with rugby, it's that point of, when using like a medicine ball and stuff like that, doing passes with them, and that power, like wall throws, those type of explosive, like heavy throws are great. And obviously you can do them overhead, you can throw them behind like keg tosses and stuff like that. You can really get inventive and have a lot of fun with it all. So there's obviously massively, I think, as you said there, it depends how far away from the sport you want to go. And that's where I think what I've learned from yourself, really, even like from the conversations that we've had where I've spoken about cycling and say training, is in like do you really need to do the leg exercises to get stronger at cycling, or do you just need to do better cycling? And it's like that balance and understanding, okay, cool. Is it just, am I doing the leg exercises for the cycling, or am I doing it because I think I should be doing it? So there's that slight like balance.
Exactly.
So what about his part where he mentions about the active recovery? Like what would you recommend as an active recovery style session?
Yeah, active recovery, general principles, you want to get some blood flowing, get the joints moving through good ranges of motion, and basically allow the body to heal without adding more fatigue into the system. I think common pitfalls in recovery days are probably overstretching and losing tension in your muscles. So you want to recover, but you don't want to become like a floppy mess, which I think if you do, a 2-hour yin yoga session, and that's probably not ideal for a sport like football. So actually similar movements to the sport and lower intensity, like a light jog or anything that gets the blood flow going and the joints experiencing the ranges of motion that they need for the sport would be where to start, but just moderating the intensity and not accumulating more stress and fatigue. Like for some people, actually a bit of loading on a rest day could be great, as long as it's not so stressful that it adds to the recovery demands of the week. But if somebody's unstable, for example, the loading and the creation of tension actually will benefit them when they get back to training more than stretching off in that floppy mess situation.
So I guess that kind of also leads into then his last part where he speaks about the injury prevention exercises. So when you talk about loading on those recovery days, they're like perfect exercise, as I said. So you're getting movement through the joints and you're trying to, silly lunges I think are a great example of doing these specific lunges that are made for whatever your imbalances or weaknesses are that need to be worked on. So I guess that'd be a perfect time to be doing them, no?
Exactly right. Yeah. So injury prevention, what we're looking at is preparing the body for the demands of the sport or your normal training. So the main thing is tissue tolerance. So just having reps through your body accumulated slowly over time is the best way to prevent against injury. So I was actually listening to Joe Rogan interviewing Matt Fraser recently, and they're talking about, I can't remember his name, but this guy who runs a marathon every day. And
sorry, carry on. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And Joe made a good point, which was most people say it takes 6 months to recover from a marathon, but that's if you don't really run. If you run a marathon every day, then you can recover from a marathon every day. And the reason his body can hold up to that is because he's slowly accumulated that volume until his body's now used to doing it every single day. And he has that tissue tolerance, like his connective tissue, his muscles, everything are used to doing that workload and recovering from it. So in terms of handling the stresses of your sport, building up so that a 90-minute football match is just par for the course. Your body's used to doing that, and there's not really a shortcut to it. It's just that slow accumulation of stress over time, which conditions the body to be able to withstand those demands. Other than just like reps and total training volume, obviously good mechanics are key, so you're not overusing any muscles or joints more than is optimal. That looking to reduce your imbalances and hone your technique, which also, like, good technique isn't just good for sports performance, it does reduce your injury risk because you're not overstressing the things that aren't designed or evolved to handle them. And making sure that you're comfortable and strong in the ranges of motion that you need in sport. For example, like in football, if you need to take a high ball down, can you lift your leg that high without pulling a hammy? Like, that should be part of your training to condition yourself to be able to control that range and protect against the one-timer match that you actually need to use it.
Yeah, so I guess obviously to save your time wondering, hire Ash as your coach, and he'll be able to give you some prescriptions to help you dominate the football pitch.
There you go.
So nice. Now on to James Smith. So not that James Smith, but we have a coach, James Smith here, who has said how to effectively bridge the gap between rehab and training.
Another cracker.
This is you all over, isn't it?
This is basically what my career is all about. So right up my street. And so I think rehab in my eyes, is traditionally centered around the specific injured area. So say something's hurt, torn, tendonitis, the rehab is focused around getting that broken thing better. And training is around like the system-wide overall performance within which that specific thing plays a part. Usually you'll be discharged from rehab when that broken thing is pain-free, and you're then told, yeah, just crack on to training. But that hasn't usually given enough respect or acknowledged why that thing got broken in the first place. This is obviously assuming that there's not been a collision or incident like, you know, a bad rugby tackle or something that's the trauma has created the injury. If it's like a overuse or chronic condition that's developed over time with no one-off incident. And the gap for me is basically how is that, what was the root cause and how can we correct the root cause and integrate it so that you can get back to normal training without thinking about it? Because you shouldn't be doing isolated rehab exercises and then going straight back into full training. So this is where the silly lunges really come into play, in that if we know that a certain muscle or joint is getting overused, how can we, first of all, diagnose it to understand that that is the crux of the issue? And then how can we teach the body to not repeat its mistake and spread the workload across other areas of the body? And it's basically a game of transitioning from that. Like, once the tissue's healed, then we need to create exercises or choose exercises that make a really steady and gradual progression back to the full training exercise without letting that overuse or muscle imbalance play out. And actually, like Gus from WIT is a good example of this, in that he had bursitis in his shoulder from playing tennis when he wasn't used to playing tennis and hitting the ball too hard. That's what he says anyway. And basically, once the bursitis has calmed down, he could go back to training normally, but actually the root cause of why he got the bursitis hasn't been addressed. Like, the pain might have diminished, but the mechanics which caused the pain haven't been sorted. So what we did was do assessment. So it was like a 2-hour assessment to understand what's going on with that shoulder that caused the bursitis. And just as to work through this example, we could see that that shoulder was unstable and it lacked stability in a few motions. So like shoulder flexion going towards overhead, abduction going wider, and external rotation, which is basically like a forehand or a serve in tennis, which were the two movements that were most painful for him. So the goal then is to get him back to those movements with a stable shoulder. And then there's a bit of detective work to figure out that we saw that his pec major was really lacking in function in those particular movements. So what exercises can we design to get pec major working in those directions, and then slowly building him up towards eventually doing forehands and serves. But that can involve like banded exercises, side planks, just anything that gets the key criteria of pec major working and shoulder stability being challenged without triggering the pain. And that's the sort of art around the science, to just find that right dose where he can get a good training stimulus without overdoing it and lapsing back into a bursitis situation. So it sounds quite complicated as an individual case, but the principle of figure out why the injury happened in the first place, and then piecemeal make a plan for moving back towards the problematic movement is my take on effectively bridging the gap.
So identifying the problem and then walking before you start running, basically.
Exactly.
You just don't jump to there, because from what I've taken from that is as you said, as soon as then that pain disappears, like, oh, cool, I can now go back to it. But as you said, you didn't address the root cause, which then means it will come back. It might not come back straight away, but it'll probably come back quicker than it come originally, because it's then something that you're aware of.
Yeah, exactly. And it's basically just dialing back the problematic movement. Think of it that way. So if Gus went straight back to smashing forehands, then I'm sure the pain would come on very quickly. Yeah. So what is a reduced version of the same problematic movement that he can actually train and get the right muscles firing?
Nice. We had two questions which were very similar. So we had one from CY Fitness and one from Josh Yannick. Now, CY Fitness's question starts out by saying, any advice for students who get back pain from sitting down all day? And I think this is a great question because it goes beyond just students. Obviously, most people are now working from home still, and most people thought it wasn't going to last as long as it did, so they didn't get stand-up desks or anything like that. So they have been sitting in probably compromising chairs and just not an ideal situation. And then Josh comes up also with the question of, what's a lunge protocol that you should do every day, 15 minutes tops, and kind of catering to sitting all day? So like trying to work on getting that glute activation rather than hip flexor stretching.
Yeah, it's good questions. I think very relevant, like you say, in lockdown times. For me, like, because I obviously used to work in an office and have worked in corporate wellbeing as well. I think the first thing to say to at CY Fitness is to check his desk setup, like you alluded to with the standing desk there. If you are in a compromised position all day, you can only expect that, your body's going to complain, and you're going to overuse your back or load up joints that aren't necessarily designed to be in those situations for extended periods of time. The most common, how should I say this? I guess a opinion I have, which is slightly different to normal advice in terms of monitor height, is normally occupational therapists or occupational health specialists will advise that your eyes are level with the top of your monitor. And I actually say you should have the middle of the screen level with your eyes, which is unusually high, like weirdly high. You're probably going to need to get a box to put your laptop riser on to get the screen actually that high. And the reason is the average position that you're looking on the screen is the middle. So you don't want to be looking down to see the middle. You want to be looking straight ahead. And actually, so you're looking up for the top and down for the bottom. And for me, a quite simple tweak does help a lot of people with neck pain because, you're just looking straight ahead rather than down most of the time. Obviously, having a good chair or standing makes a huge difference. And the key thing, whether you're sitting or standing, is just not to be still for extended periods of time. If you can take calls walking around your house or walking in the park, do that at any opportunity possible. It's the stillness that's really the problem. And looking at CY Fitness's back pain, I think checking your hip function and core strength are the really simple wins there. And to Josh's point, on the hip flexors, like a lot of people, when they spend a lot of time sat down, they focus on cranking out their hip flexors and trying to stretch them off because they're in a shortened position. But actually, the thing that provides more stability to the hip is the glutes. So trying to get the glutes going rather than slacking off the hip flexors will provide more support to the back. And doing stuff like hinging, single leg balances to just try and increase the stability contribution from the hips will deload the back, because that's quite often what happens is you get really deactivated, for want of a better phrase, hips. So they're not doing much for you. And so the back has to tighten up to try and create the stability that's lacking in the hips. So the three-way lunge is always a great go-to because it just ticks so many boxes: forward lunge, side lunge, and rotating lunge, making sure that you have them have the form nailed. So focusing on toes dead ahead on the side lunge, inside leg locked out, and toes turned out to either 90 or 135 degrees for the rotating lunge, and also trying to keep that inside leg straight. Just ticks like so many movement boxes and should get your glutes going as well. Plenty of variations of that on online to check out.
Lateral lunges for me are always a win. Like for me, like of all any lunge, it's I find it normally fires up my glute med, and it gets it feeling, as you said, more stable. So it feels like they're awake rather than just being asleep because they're in that seated position. And I think also then just also going back to CY Fitness is part of the fact for him being a student. So you want to ask yourself as in how much time are you spending seated? essentially? Is it while you're doing lectures, or is it, say, during, obviously now, because probably being a lot more over online, so it's going to be looking a lot at the computer screen. So as you said about adjusting that height, couple of shoe boxes, get it up, you haven't got to invest necessarily in a full-blown standing desk. I used for the longest a bolt powders box just to get the laptop up higher, and then I got one of those. It was like 20-30 quid off Amazon, which was like a laptop stand that essentially I could position it completely up, and I had a wireless mouse and wireless keyboard. That's where I think most people will get the biggest win from, like, things they can buy is in a wireless mouse and keyboard rather than using your laptop one, because it adjusts everything for you, so that the monitor, as you said, the monitor is, you're looking straight ahead, and I've always been about the middle of the screen, because as you say, that's where you look. Like right now, you're in the middle of my screen because I'm looking dead ahead at there. So it is funny how they're telling you to kind of keep your head slightly down, which naturally then your shoulders start to come up and round, and then your traps start to hurt, your shoulders come forward. So it's like naturally you have that head up. So yeah, as a student, you've got the opportunity to probably be a bit more flexible with certain things, like, can you listen to the lecture while you're out in the park, as you said, can you be a bit more remote and move more, because that's probably one of the biggest things with all my corporate clients that I've ever had over the years and stuff like that, is it's all well and good strengthening them in the gym and stuff like that, but when they then get back to the office, they're sitting there for most of their day in that compromised position. So it's about just constantly even if it's going to get a drink, or just keep moving, and it's it's important.
Spot on. So
we have another one here from Nick Small, so it's another voice one. So let's get this one played.
Nick Smale, I believe.
So I've been reading about the endurance benefits of doing long sessions of low intensity cardio training to build out aerobic capacity and efficiency, as well as having some other benefits. This has always sounded kind of boring and time consuming. My question is, by focusing my training on higher intensity intervals, am I missing out on some of these benefits of longer sessions? And to what extent is training at mainly level 4 and 5 actually detrimental to performance? Cheers.
That's a nice question.
Great question. Yeah. All the way from sunny Rio. Thank you, Nick.
Oh, nice.
So, a lot in this one as well. The key question is training at zones 4 and 5 going to be detrimental and not incorporating much low intensity steady state? I think the first thing to say is that, as we all know, zone 2 is a myth. It doesn't actually exist. No, I'm joking. So let's unpick this a little bit. Nick mentioned aerobic capacity and aerobic efficiency as two different things, which I think is a key thing to pull out. So most people think of aerobic capacity as your fitness, and it would typically be measured as your VO2 max, which is the volume of oxygen that you can take in and process in a time frame, usually a minute. And that's used as an indicator of your fitness. However, it doesn't correlate one-for-one with your fitness performance. So you can have the ability to take in huge amounts of oxygen, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being a good endurance runner, for example, because your aerobic efficiency might not be so good. And I'm actually quite a good example of this, is that my VO2 max is okay, according to Garmin. Haven't had it tested officially yet, but my endurance performance doesn't translate as well as my shorter sort of outputs. And this is where aerobic efficiency comes in. So for something like running, because it is still a skill, I waste a lot of energy when I run. So even though I'm taking in potentially more oxygen than somebody else, it doesn't mean that oxygen translates into effective performance. And the thing I like to think of to explain this is, you could have two cars, one with a huge engine, but it's got really poor economy, like an old American muscle car, and it might have, like, I don't know, stuff hanging off it. So the aerodynamics are poor, and you could then have like a super aerodynamic hybrid with great mileage and economy. The same amount of fuel going into that muscle car won't let it go as far as the economic car. And that's sort of a like aerobic capacity versus efficiency analogy. So the to relate it back to Nick's question, the high intensity stuff is actually better for improving your aerobic capacity. When you really push your threshold and get super out of breath, you will improve your VO2 max faster than if you do the same amount of work at low intensity. We know that. However, for endurance performance, both need to be considered. You obviously want a high VO2 max, but the efficiency, the longer you go on, becomes more and more of a factor, because if you're wasting X amount of oxygen per kilometer, every subsequent kilometer you run becomes more and more costly. So for Nick's actually an exceptional runner. I think he ran a 3:01 marathon, which is crushing.
Wow.
For two reasons. One, because he missed out on 3 hours, and two, because his mum actually beat him as well, or her best time is faster than that. I think she ran like 2:59.59 or something. So he has to do another one to beat her and to get sub 3. And it's amazing how good he is, because there's building in a little bit more structure to his training program. I'm sure he'll be able to crack 3. So to relate it back to his training program, is he detrimentally affecting his performance by only training in zones 4 and 5? I wouldn't say he's hurting his performance, but he might be leaving some out there. And the fundamental question underpinning all of this is, how much time do you have to train? Because if you only have a limited time, you've got to really prioritize stuff. And say you've got 4 hours a week, doing 4 hours of low intensity steady state isn't going to improve your aerobic capacity as much as if you had at least one interval session in there, potentially 2. So I would make sure you're getting the maximum bang for buck out of the training hours you have. You'll be limited by how much high intensity work you can do just from a recovery point of view. Like if you did 4 hours of intervals a week, not many people could recover from that, and their performance probably wouldn't. It would plateau reasonably quickly. So if you have plateaued, you have 2 options, basically, to increase intensity, which you can't really do because you're maxed out, or to increase your volume. So then you have to look to build in just more time running, and to sort of cite the benefits of that lower intensity stuff, the aerobic efficiency. So just by accumulating mileage, your body becomes more efficient in that you trim out all those extra wobbles and vibrations which aren't helping you move forwards. So your run economy becomes much better. And going back to that tissue tolerance, like you're just accumulating more steps. The joint angles are greater when you run. So from a muscle loading point of view, it's kind of like strength training in that you don't get so much momentum and elastic recoil to propel you forward. So you have to work a bit harder. So you're making your body more robust to hold up against the longer distances as well. And metabolically as well, you're improving your mitochondrial density and becoming more efficient at using that oxygen for energy output and fat metabolism that Luke touched on last week. So once you've sort of maxed out bang for buck for the training hours you have, you've basically just got to add in more, but it needs to be more volume that you can also recover from, which is another advantage of doing the low intensity stuff, because it's less stressful on the body. So you're more likely to be able to tolerate more weekly miles if they're from lower intensity. Like, how have you found, like, doing your cycling stuff, mate? You've obviously got a blend of max power intervals and long rides on the weekend. Yeah. How's that been for you?
It's just quite interesting because obviously, as you were saying, a lot of those things, and where I'm trying to do running as well, is I'm finding the balance between the two, like as like the energy system wise, very, very interesting. So I've recently gone from a training program which was mainly based around sweet spot on cycling, so pretty much around the FTP, so literally just at that point on my 60 minute average. And I've come more to a polarized approach where I've got some more zone 2/3 workouts, a bit more like just longer work, and then a lot more VO2 and just like peak power, like top end stuff. And as you said, it's about how it structures. I have like intensity, then followed by low volume, then it go intensity by like low volume. So it's how it's structured. And in my weekend, I have my longer ride where it's definitely not a zone 2. it's always something like
exist.
no, it's always like a 3, 4, 5, because again it just depends on where it is. But and I'm normally with someone, but it's been really interesting to essentially see the difference of when I'm trying to say, when I've come back to running, is in trying to bring up my zone 2. The difference there is it's really hard to run at zone 2 because that's not how you run in a way. So as in, because I'm running, as you said, like you haven't got the bounce, you haven't got the reflex, so it's a lot more muscular. So because it's a lot more muscular, my heart rate's higher, which means it's essentially like I'm walking. And this is the thing, like obviously when you are trying to build your zone 2, is in you have to understand that it is going to be very slow at the start. And I really like the saying that I heard is like, if all you do is say work on your peak power, that top end stuff, you're just raising your ceiling, but you're not raising your floor. So you're creating such a big distance between the two. So you need to also bring up your floor. So you're constantly keeping the same sort of distance between the two, because as your zone 2 increases, it means you have a much higher low end threshold, which is especially like ideally down the line, I get to do an Ironman and stuff like that, which is a lot more zone 2/3. So I need to make sure I can produce good power at zone 2, 3, especially because it's a fuckload of miles. So
yeah, that's a great point. I think the other thing to say about zone 2 is that your aerobic system services the anaerobic. So every time you have a hill or a sprint, or in a race you might have a breakaway or something, and you tap into those higher zones, the way you recover from those efforts is aerobic. So you need to have you can have the power, but you have to recover from the power during the race. So having that good aerobic efficiency is key. And it's probably one of the things that I struggled with in sport. I'd have a burst of 2 or 3 minutes in rugby doing loads of stuff, and then I'd be like hiding in the backs to try and recover. And I think having that better floor, like you say, is really, really important for absolute all-round performance.
Oh, massively. And it's funny because just yesterday, so I had a peak performance workout, peak power workout, which was 40 seconds of basically sprinting. So 10 seconds standing, 20 seconds seated, and then 10 seconds standing if you can. If not, you just go back to it and just push as much as you can, right? And then 5 minutes recovery. So like pretty much say it's like zone 2 sort of wattage, or even just a bit less. And first 2, it was like I was okay, like the 5 minutes was enough. But the third one, like when I started my third interval, I was annoyed with myself because it's like I was at 30 seconds and I had to, so I was gone to stand up, 31, 32, sit down, and then I just disappeared like nothing, because then the recovery, and I was like, then it come to the fourth one and it was better, but that was because it was the last one. So you always have that little bit extra. But on the third one, I even said this to myself, I said, you're going to fail here because it's the third one, and I did. And it's because I just knew like I hadn't recovered, and that's because and my zone 2 energy, my aerobic system is pony. It's like compared to my top end stuff, but I need to be able to recover. And that's what yesterday's workout was all about those breakaways, about those sprints. Because I think especially with cycling in particular, you need to be able to put your foot down, hold it, settle back into say threshold, put your foot back down, to then that's where you then get the break. Because people can go up and then settle into a threshold, but if you can break again and a threshold again, that's then where. And when I was doing my VO2 intervals the other day as well, that it's exactly that. And but it's it's nice now because now I'm also incorporating those zone 2/3 sessions, and I'm doing everything I can while I'm on the bike. I'm watching my heart rate. I'm nasal breathing, deep breathing. I always find as well, it kind of seems counterintuitive, but I take a big deep breath in through the nose and I kind of hold my breath, and then I let it out, and then my heart rate drops. And if it doesn't move, that hold of the breath gets it starting to lower again. So it's it's fun because it's just one big experiment. Especially when you do train for as long as say, and like obviously your mate does there, and like with myself, it's like when you're doing as much as you can. That's why data is so fun, because you can look at it and say, okay, this is what happens when I do this. This is what happens when I do that, and that's how you can improve. Just like with all sorts of training. So
there you go. Hope that answered your question, Nick.
Yeah. And last but not least, we've got another one from James. So James says, with lockdown, no gyms open, and a newish born kid, it's been extremely hard to find any motivation, time to work out. And if I did create time, I'd feel a tad selfish, although I think it's just an excuse. Do you have any advice or tips on how to get started? So I personally, I love this question because this obviously resonates a lot with me, and I've only recently really been able to find my groove. And I'd say, when I say recently, that was probably saying the last yearish. But for me, my biggest bit of advice is start with something you 100% can do no matter what. Even if it's like, cool, I'm going to do like, say, a set of 10 press ups and a set of, say, 20 squats that day. Just do it every morning. Then you're creating that routine, that habit. Like Atomic Habit is one of the best books that simplifies all these kind of thoughts and processes, and he says along these lines as well. But you want to have the option to do something that you can do without failure, because I know with James, and it's like he likes to go to the gym, hits it hard, probably hit a good couple of times a week, and now because he can't necessarily do that, he sees no other option. Says now, like, if I can't do 3 or 4, it's the all or nothing mentality. And I know he's very similar to me. I'm of that same mindset. It's all or nothing. I'm either focused like hell or I'm eating a Domino's pizza. So it's like, it's finding that balance. But it's where I've got better now is understanding that slight little bit of that middle ground of saying, right, maybe 1 session a week is all I can do at the moment, especially when the gyms reopen. Just trying to get there more, not even just for the physical benefits, but also for the mental benefits, and now having a little bit of time away from your son, and also getting some time for yourself to train, because at the end of the day, he's working hard day in, day out. He's worked all through lockdown because he's in construction. So there's been a constant, he's not really switched off. So it's feeling selfish is very normal. And even like for myself, it's why I start all my Saturday cycles at 7 a.m. because I don't want to take up my day cycling. I have to be a dad. So like the other week, I come back after a 100k cycle, and then I was up within half hour, I was out the door. So I'd eaten breakfast, I was out the door, and we was in Greenwich, in Greenwich on the cable cars. So do you know what I mean? So it's like, I had no time to switch off, and it wasn't until the end of the day that I could then switch off. But that was the thing, I had to get up earlier, and I don't mind doing that sacrifice because I want to train, so I have to get up earlier. So it's something that I know I have to do. So it's making sure that if you only say to yourself just once a week that you have to get up, say, an hour earlier than normal or half hour earlier than normal, you can do that because you can commit to that just once a week.
Yeah, great answer. I think, I've not got much more to add than that. I think the only thing that jumped to mind was it's not selfish to look after yourself. I think that's a common attitude, to think that looking after yourself means you're taking away from other people. But actually, especially if you're a parent, you're being a role model and you're looking after your health, which ultimately is going to be good for your family as well as you as an individual. So obviously the way you might go about it and being more time efficient or getting up earlier so that you have time with your family might be affected. But I think it's very important that you don't think of it as selfish to look after your health. It's actually good for you and everyone around you.
Yeah, and I think just lastly on this as well, it's like, so 2 points. One, I was doing some bicep curls and some ab row rollouts the other day on the patio, and because obviously gainz, right? And I left the yoga mat out and the ab row out. Chloe goes down to the end of the garden without me there and she starts doing ab row rollouts. So obviously not like as in proper, but it's because she's seen me do that. So it's that influence, as you say. So it's like, it's not hiding away and showing that she often sees me on the bike cycling and stuff like that. So she sees Hannah training. She sees these things. It's only going to impact her in a positive light. As you said, it's feeling selfish. You shouldn't. But at the same time, something that is important is understanding that maybe you choose, say, to train for 45 minutes rather than playing COD. It's like that type of thing. It's but only once a week. So you keep playing COD on all your other days and then instead of that, you choose to, say, train in that, say, 30 to 60 minutes session that you would normally do elsewhere, and can start at body weight. As I said, just keep it simple. And and lastly on that, because it triggered another one that you said, which was that I really like the saying that they say about, you don't serve people from an empty cup, you serve it from a full cup, and you serve them from your saucer. So as a liquid comes out of the cup into the saucer, you give them the saucer, because unless you are full, you cannot serve anyone, because you're going to feel like shit. And training, if you do it effectively enough, it doesn't have to take long. You can do a good 30-minute session and absolutely have a solid one. All my resistance sessions now are basically about 30 minutes, because everything's a superset. So I just get the work in. So again, it's just prioritizing and seeing where you can improve. But yeah, so that's been really nice, Ash. I think it'd be really nice to maybe finish off with a couple of quick fires. So just a couple of nice simple ones. We're going to start with, I'm going to say this one. So let's go with one thing people would be surprised to know about you.
I think for me, I was on a team that won the BBC Two quiz show Eggheads.
Ain't that like University Challenge or something?
Yeah, not as hard as that.
All right.
It's a little bit simpler, but basically I was just making up the numbers, and it's a long story, but essentially if you know the format, there's 5 absolute brain boxes who are quiz champions, and you take them on, and they just destroyed us in the early round. So there's only one of us left, and he beat all 5 of them in the final, and won us a bunch of cash when we were, I think it was 2012. So
nice.
That's one of my, yeah. What about you, mate? What's your surprising?
I really struggled with this. I had to ask Hannah yesterday. I was like, I just can't think, because I'm pretty open. But so one thing that I said is, so when I was 16, I went to college and I started my BTEC in civil engineering. And at lunchtime, I used to go to street dance classes for a bit, which I was doing street dance for a while, and we was getting to a stage where we was going to perform in a local theatre called the Kenneth Moore Theatre. So we was going to do a performance there. That unfortunately didn't happen. But then what led to that was I started to do salsa dancing. And salsa at the college was with normally a bunch of like 6-year-old women. So I was spending my lunches doing the salsa dancing. So so I've done a little bit of street dancing and salsa. That's
hey, what's street dancing? Is it like break dancing?
Yeah, it's kind of along those lines. Yeah, so it would be like back then it would have been to like songs like Chris Brown, like Run It, that sort of time. So that type of music, that type of style, so that kind of thing. Yeah. Wear my tracksuit, wear my flat peak, and
Mate, get some of those out.
Yeah, so this one here. So we have, what's one thing you do every day without fail?
Yeah, I thought about this one, and I've got quite a disciplined sort of morning and evening routine in lockdown, but that obviously doesn't carry through so well into normal life or if I go away. The one constant other than sleeping, I would say, is coffee. I can't remember the last time I didn't have a coffee, and it is a consistent highlight of my day. A bit boring, but in terms of like every day without fail, I think it's probably the only one.
Yeah, do you know what, this was an incredibly hard question for me, because I didn't want to just say coffee as well, because it's pretty much the go-to, but I realised it's not coffee for me, because we're out of beans at the moment. And so we've only got crappy beans, and I refuse to lower my standards to that. So I can't. Every so often I'll try and be like, look, I'll just do it. I'll make a flat white, and you know when it just comes out of the coffee machine like piss in water. You're like, there's no flake. Oh, it's just there's no pressure. I can't deal with it. So when I say like every day without fail, I would say coffee, but I'd say caffeine as general. I will find caffeine on some form, whether that's a gel or whatever. I'll be having caffeine. But I think the other thing is I tend to have every morning will be my water, lemon and salt every single morning. Just have that. That's my first thing I have to kind of just hydrate me. And then I normally have a greens powder. So Smart Protein I use. It's really cool because it's like a little rip sachet and it's like peppermint flavor. Really nice. Gets me done every morning. So that's probably been my daily thing. Let's go another one. So favorite guilty pleasure food?
It's quite easy for me. Big fat burgers. Just it's my go-to. I think if it's a Friday night and I haven't got any food in the house, that's probably where I'm looking.
Yeah, I'd have to say the same. I would have said pizza. I would have said like a Domino's something, but I haven't even had one in such a long time. Whereas I have a burger nearly every week, so I'm like, it's not always like. And when I say have a burger, like that would just be your classic, like your beef and your burger. But nearly everything, Hannah kind of takes the piss out of me, but I'll make everything into a sandwich. So I'll make sure I have. So just as long as there's a bit of bread or something, I'll be like, right, getting that in between there. I like eating things like that. So
yeah, making good time. What's your favorite burger chain or restaurant?
Yeah, so I have to say probably Honest Burger. Because I like the experience there of like them and their rosemary chips. Like that for me, it's like the chips are just right and crunchy, and the burger's just right and juicy. So there are so many good burgers about, but that one I think they get one other one though, and this one. So if you're ever in Brighton, right? It's called Burger Brothers. All right. One of my clients, she recommended to me years and years ago. Went down there, and so it's not open on Saturday. I think it's not open on Saturdays, or it's not, whatever it was. Right, on Sundays not open. So he was down there, got it. Best burger I've ever eaten, and it was the best burger. It was voted the best burger in the country.
Wow.
Honestly, and the thing is, they don't sell chips. All right, you can only get it to take away because they have a couple of stalls in there. But honestly, the best burger you'll ever have. And Ash, get down to Brighton to have it. I promise you, it's Burger Brothers, unreal. What about yourself?
It used to be Bleecker Street, but then they stopped doing the Bleecker burger, like the one with black pudding. I couldn't believe it. And you go and
you can get that now. You can get that as a home delivery one. No, you can get that as a home delivery, so you can make it at home.
Yeah, it doesn't travel. I haven't done the homemade ones, but it doesn't travel that well on delivery. No. So in its absence, I think Black Bear Burger in Shoreditch is my favourite burger out. But I need to make an honourable mention for Marks and Spencer's best ever burger with bone marrow.
So good. They are so good. Yeah. When you do yourself with a nice like sourdough roll or something like crunchy, oh fuck yeah.
So it's a bit of a tradition. Me and Pete and Josh, a couple of mates, we would have FNBs, Friday night burgers, which we've carried on remotely sometimes through lockdown, just as the highlight of the week to get a couple of those bad boys.
They are good. I now kind of want one for tonight. I might have to go and make my way down. I think it's going to be a Friday night book for me now.
It's already booked in.
Love it. And lastly, what top book have you read/listened to?
For me, recently, I loved The Art of War, an old classic by Sun Tzu. On the surface, it's about sort of military strategy, but there's a lot of deep lessons around strategy in general and can be applied to sport and business and just like life lessons, I think. And it's just so densely packed with knowledge. It's a very short book, but I found myself sort of rereading passages and chapters just because the information was so dense.
Yeah. I got that in Audible. I needed to listen to that.
Yeah, normally you'd probably listen to it speeded up, but listen to it slowed down if I was you, because it's just like you want to pause on every bit. And that's recently, but I think overall I'm a big fan of the 4-hour work week. There's a few bits in it where you're a bit like, he gets a bit carried away with himself, but there's a few principles and perspectives which I found very refreshing. And I think I read it at a time when I was just leaving my corporate career. So it was really helpful in going sort of self-employed and figuring out how I wanted to structure my life outside of the normal structures of 9 to 5s.
Nice. I couldn't pick one. I've got a couple, and one physical book reading wise has to be the Daily Stoic. Mainly only because I really struggle to read on paper, so it's 1 page a day, so I can do that, but only because I normally listen to books and stuff like that while I'm doing stuff, so it's finding the time. So the books that I kind of recommend, one is Atomic Habits. I always I really like that book. I think it kind of, as I said earlier in the podcast, it kind of really solidifies some habits which resonated a lot with me. So, and there's a lot of things that I can see myself in and why I do certain things. The second one is Ego is the Enemy, Ryan Holiday. I really like that book because I'd say when I listened to it, it was at a time where I was relatively egotistical when it come to, say, training and stuff like that. I was all about having to lift the most and stuff like that. And anyone that's been around me, especially from back in my Virgin days, it would be like, I'm the strongest person here and I'm going to stay the strong, and I'm just going to do stupid shit. Like walk up to someone's 1 rep max deadlift, completely cold, and lift it. Like, you're just asking for problems. But I'm just like, when I think back, I'm just like, but at the same time, it's built me into the person I am now. So I wouldn't go otherwise. 2 other books, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I think it could be summarized in just the title. I think it was a bit of but again, I listened to it and it was fine. But it related at a time when I kind of got into CrossFit and people were judging CrossFitters, and I was in a commercial gym, and it's like, it was that thing of just not giving a fuck what other people think led me to do CrossFit and just enjoy it and embrace it, and it then led to everything else. So that one kind of like really stuck with me. And the last one is like a parenting one. And for any new parent that's I'm just trying to find what it was called, because I forgot to write this one down.
It's not that one, the book you wish your parents
yes
read.
See, you know, it was that
you've
one.
mentioned it to me before.
Yeah, so that book, the book you wish your parents have read, like for me, the book you wish your parents read by Philippa Perry. It's, for me, it was like, it kind of highlighted, say, maybe things that maybe my parents might have done when I was younger that made me not be so, say, annoyed at that or anything like that. And then also made me realize when Chloe might be acting a certain way or anything like that, that maybe this is what she's thinking, because it's a lot of it is putting your mind, because it's from a psychologist, and it's putting your mind in the thought of the child. And like realizing that, say, when you're in the park and you're cold and you want to go, but they're running around headless and they're not cold and they don't want to go, you can't just say, right, we're out of here, because it's like, we're like, what the fuck? So you have to say, like, cool, we're going to leave in 5 minutes, and then right, we're going to leave in 2 minutes. You remind it, and then right, we're going. They're going to still put up a fuss, but you're giving them an understanding. So for me, that book was really good one for, say, parenting and kind of getting the mindset.
Nice. That's lovely.
Yeah, mate. I've really enjoyed this. This was really good fun. Really loved this. We'd love to do more of these Q&A episodes. So if you would like something like this, do throw some questions in there and we can start piling them up and then do another one of these Q&A episodes. Mate, it's been emotional. Been a year.
Yeah, I know. Very proud. And yeah, please be cracking on. Thanks again to everyone for submitting the questions. I think we got more than we anticipated.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's loads of fun to answer them. We're keen to get more. So don't be shy in getting in touch and letting us know any topics you want covered. There's a few of these we could have done full podcasts on, I'm sure. And we've got some exciting ones in the pipeline. I think the only thing we need to mention is a quick shout out and thank you to our sponsor, Wit Fitness. Use discount code LL15 at wit-fitness.com. And yeah, it's something we're really proud to be associated with still a few years down the line. Highly recommend all their merch. It's basically what I wear all day, every day, and including this navy blue outline tee, part of the new spring collection.
Love it, mate.
Yeah, just please go check it out, guys. I think 15% is a great discount. So
yeah, that really is, and we really appreciate it when we got given that as a, because you know the newsletter is 10%. That 15% is that's special. So we really appreciate that. And so do head over, check out, and see what you can find, and spend as much money as you can. But thanks a lot for listening, guys. I really hope you did enjoy this. We want to start potentially taking these into some live podcasts. So if that is something that you might be you would like to maybe watch or get involved in, maybe throw us some times and stuff that you'd like to maybe see us, and we can look to maybe pivot and move our schedule to fit some more guys at the same time. So enough rambling. Thanks a lot for watching or listening, and as always, we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, guys.